Chapter 16 The Goblet of Fire. I don't believe it, Ron said in a stunned voice as the Hogwarts student filed back up the step behind the party from Drumstand. Crumb, Harry, Mr. Crumb. For heaven's sake, Ron is only a quick player, said Hermione. Only a Quidditch player? Ron said, looking at her as though he couldn't believe his ears. Hermione, he's one of the best seekers in the world. I had no idea he was still at school. As they recrossed the entrance hall with the rest of the Hogwarts students, heading for the Great Hall, Harry saw Lee Jordan jumping up and down on the sole of his feet to get a better look at the back of the Crumb's head. Several 6-year girls were frantically searching their pockets as they walked. Oh, I don't believe it. I haven't got a single quill on me. Do you think he signed my hat in lipstick? Really? Hermione said softly. As they passed the girls, now squabbling over the lipstick. I'm getting his autograph if I can, said Ron. You haven't got a quill, have you, Harry? Nope. They are upstairs in my bag, said Harry. They walked over to the Gryffindor table and sat down. Ron was there to sit and the side facing the doorway, because Crumb and his fellow Drumstand students were still gathered around it, apparently unsure about where they should sit. The students from Boxbatten had chosen sit at the Ravenclaw's table. They were looking around the great hall with glum expression on their faces. Few of them were still clutching several and shawl around their head. It's not that cold, said Hermione defensively. Why didn't they bring cloaks? Oh, here, come and sit over here, Ron hissed. Oh, here, Hermione, buzz up, make a space. What? Too late, said Ron bitterly. Victor Crumb and his fellow Drumstang student had settled themselves at the Slytherin table. Harry could see Malfoy grab and go, looking very smug about this as he watched Malfoy bend toward to speak to Crumb. Yeah, that's right. Smam up to him, Malfoy, said Ron scathingly. I bet Crumb can see right through him, though. Bet he gets people falling over his all the time. Where do you reckon they are going to sleep? We couldn't offer him a space in our dormitory, Harry. I wouldn't mind give him my bed. I could keep on a camp bed. Hermione snorted. They look a lot happier than the Baxbot lot, said Harry. The Drumstang students were pulling off their heavy furs and looking up at the starry black ceiling with an expression of interest. Some of them were picking up the garden plates and goblets and examining them, apparently impressed. At the staff table, Fletch, the caretaker, was adding chairs. He was wearing his moldy old tailcoat in honor of the occasion. Harry was surprised to see that he added 4 chairs, 2 on either side of the Dumbledores. But there are only 2 extra people, Harry said. Why Fletch putting out 4 chairs? Who else is coming? Said Ron vaguely. He was still staring avidly at Crumb. When all the students had entered the hall and settled down at their house table, the staff entered, filling up to the top table and taking their seats. Last in the line were Professor Dumbledore, Professor Karkaroff, and Madame Maxim. When their headmistress appeared, the pupil from Baxbottom leaped to their feet. A few of the Hogwarts students laughed. The Baxbottom party appeared quite embarrassed, however, and did not resume their seat until Madame Maxim had sat down on Dumbledore's left-hand side. Dumbledore remained standing, and a silence fell over the great hall. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, ghosts and the most particular guests, said Dumbledore, beaming around at the foreign students. I have great pleasure in welcoming you all to Hogwarts. I hope the trust that you stay here will be both comfortable and enjoyable. One of Max's bottom girls, still clutching Mufford around her head, gave what was unmistakably a desired laugh. No one making you stay, Hermione whispered, bristling at her. The tournament will be officially open at the end of the feast, said Dumbledore. I now invite you all to eat, drink, and make yourself at home. He sat down, and Harry saw Falkroft lean forward at once and engage him in conversation. The plate in front of them filled with food as usual. The house elves in the kitchen seemed to have pulled out all the stops. There was a greater variety of dishes in front of them than Harry had ever seen, including several that were definitely foreign. That, said Ron, pointing at a large dish of some sort of shellfish stew that stood beside a large sticky and kidney pudding. Holy basin, said Hermione. Bless you, said Ron. It's French, said Hermione. I had it on holiday summer before last. It's very nice. I'll take your word of it, said Ron, helping himself to back pudding. The great hall seemed somehow much more crowded than usual, even though there were barely 20 additional students there. Perhaps it was because their different colored uniform stood out so clearly against the black of the Hogwarts robes. Now that they had removed their furs, the Durmstrang students were revealed to be wearing robes of a deep blue. Hagrid sidled into the hall through a door behind the staff table. 20 minutes after the start of feast, he slipped into his seat at the end of waved at Harry, Ron, and Hermione with a very heavily bandaged hand. Screw doing all right, Hagrid, Harry called. Driving Hagrid called back happily. Yeah, I'll just bet they are, said Ron quietly. Look like they have finally found food they are like, doesn't it? Hagrid's finger. That moment, a voice said, excuse me, are you wanting this? It was the girl from Baxbottom who had laughed during Dumbledore's speech. She had finally removed her muffler. A long sheet of silver blonde hair fell almost to her waist. She had large deep blue eyes and very white even teeth. Ron went purple. He started up at her and opened his mouth to reply. But nothing came out except a faint gargling noise. Yea, have it, said Harry, pushing the dish toward the girl. You are vanishing, visit. Yea, Ron said breathlessly. Yea, it was excellent. The girl picked up the dish and carried it carefully off to the Ravenclaw's table. Ron was still goggling at the girl as though he had never seen one before. Harry started to laugh. The sound seemed to jog Ron back to his sense. She's a villa, he said harshly to Harry. Of course she isn't, said Hermione tartly. I don't see anyone else gasping at her like an idiot, but she wasn't entirely right about that. As the girl crossed the hall, many boys had turned and some of them seemed to have become temporarily speechless. Just like Ron. I'm telling you, that's not a normal girl, said Ron, leaning sideways so that he could keep a clear view of her. They don't make them like that Hogwarts. They make them okay at Hogwarts, said Harry without thinking. You happen to be sitting only a few places away from the girl with the silvery hair. When you are both put your eyes back in, said Hermione briskly, you'll be able to see who's just arrived. She was pointing at the staff table. The two remaining empty seats had just been filled. Ludo Bagman was now sitting on Professor Karkaroff's other side, while Mr. Crouch, Percy's boss, was next to Madame Maxim. What are they doing here? Said Harry in surprise. They organized the Triwizard tournament, did they? Said Hermione. I suppose they wanted to be here to see it start. When the second course arrived, they noticed a number of unfamiliar deserts too. Ron examined an odd sort of pale, a bland same close the move it carefully a few inches to his right, so that it would be clearly visible from the Ravenclaw's table. Girl who looked like a villa appeared to have eaten enough, however, and did not come over to get it. Once the golden plates had been wiped clean, Dumbledore stood up again. A pleasant sort of tension seemed to be filled the hall now. Harry felt a slight thrill of excitement, wondering what was coming. Several seats down from them, Fred and George were leaning forward, staring at Dumbledore with a great concentration. The moment has come, and Dumbledore, smiling around a sea of unturned faces, the Triwizardry tournament is about to start. I would like to say a few words of explanation before we begin in the cascade. Then what? Harry muttered. Ron struggled. Just to clarify the procedure that will be following this year. But first, let me introduce, for those who do not know them, Mr. Bartmus Crouch, head of the Department of International Magical Cooperation. There was a smattering of polite applause, and Mr. Ludo Bigmon, head of the Department of Magical Game and Sprouts. There was a much louder round of applause for Bagman than from Crouch, perhaps because of his famous as a beater or simply because he looked so much more likable. He acknowledged it with a jovial wave of his hand. Bartimaeus Crouch did not smile or wave when his name was announced. Remembering him in his neat suit at the Quidditch World Cup, Harry thought he looked strange in wizard's robe. His toothbrush mustache had several parting look very odd next to Dumbledore's long white hair and beard. Mr. Bagman and Mr. Crouch were worked tirelessly over the last few months on the arrangement of the Triwizardry tournament, Dumbledore continued, and they will be joining myself, Professor Parkoff, and Madame Maxim on the panel that will judge the campaign efforts. At the mention of the world champion, the attentive of the listening students seemed to sharpen. Perhaps Dumbledore had noticed their sudden stillness, for he smiled as he said, "The cascade, then, if you please, Mr. Fudge." Fudge, who had been lurking unnoticed in a far corner of the hall, now approached Dumbledore carrying a great wooden chest encrusted with jewels. It looked extremely old. A murmur of excited interest rose from the watching student. Denies Gravy actually stood on this chair to see it properly, but being too tiny, his head hardly rose above anyone else. The instructions for the task the champion will face this year have already been examined by Mr. Crouch and Mr. Bagman, said Dumbledore, as Fleet placed the chest carefully on the table before him, and they have made the necessary arrangement for each challenge. There will be 3 tasks spaced throughout the school year, and they will test the champion in many different ways. Their magical prowess, their daring, their powers of deduction, and of course their ability to cope with danger. At the last word, the hall was filled with a silence so absolute that nobody seemed to be breathing. As you know, 3 champions compete in the tournament, Dumbledore went on calmly. 1 from each participant school. They will be marked on how well they perform each of the tournament tasks, and the champion with the highest total after task 3 will win the Triwizard Cup. The champion will be chosen by an impartial secretary of the Goblet of Fire. Dumbledore now took out his wand and tapped 3 times upon the top of the cascade. The lid cracked slowly open. Dumbledore reached inside it and pulled out a large, roughly hewn wooden cup. It would have been entirely unremarkable had it not been full to be brimmed with dancing blue-white flame. Dumbledore closed the caskshank and placed the goblet carefully on the top of it, where it would be clearly visible to everyone in the hall. Anybody wishing to submit themselves as a champion must write their name on the school clearly upon a slip of parchment and drop it into the goblet, said Dumbledore. Aspiring champions have 24 hours in which to put their names forward. Tomorrow night, Halloween. The goblet will return the names of the three it has judged most worthy to represent their schools. The goblet will place in the entrance hall tonight, where it will be freely accessible to all those wishing to compete. To ensure that no underage student yield to temptation, said Dumbledore, I will be drawing an age line around the goblet of fire once it has been placed in the entrance hall. Nobody under the age of 17 will be able to cross this line. Finally, I wish to impress upon any of you wishing to compete that this tournament is not to be entered into lightly. One champion has been selected by the Goblet of Fire. He or she is obliged to see the tournament through the end. The placing of your name in the goblet constitutes a binding magical contract. There can be no change of heart once you have become a champion. Please be very sure, therefore, that you are wholeheartedly prepared to play before you drop your name into the goblet. Now, I think it is time for bed. Good night to you all. An age line, Fred Weasley said, his eye glinting as they all made their way across the hall to close the door into the entrance hall. Well, that should be flooded by an aging potion, shouldn't it? And once your name in that goblet, you are laughing. It can't tell whether you are 17 or not. But I don't think anyone under 70 will stand a chance, said Hermione. We just haven't learned enough. Speak for yourself, said George shortly. We'll try and get it, won't you, Harry? Harry thought briefly of Dumbledore's insistence that nobody under 17 should submit their name, but then the wonderful picture of himself winning the Triwizardry tournament filled his mind again. He wondered how angry Dumbledore would be if someone younger than 17 did find a way to get over the age line. Where is he? Said Ron, who wasn't listening to a word of his conversation, but looking through the crowd to see what had become of Crumb. Dumbledore didn't say where the Dumblestrang people are sleeping, did he? But this query was answered almost instantly. They were level with the Slytherin table now, and Karkaroff had just busted up to his student. Back to the ship then. He was saying, Victor, how are you feeling? Did you eat enough? Should I send for some mulled wine from the kitchen? I saw Crumb shake his head as he pulled his fur back on Professor. I would like some wine, said one of the other Drumstein's boys hopefully. I wasn't offering it to you, Polikoff sniffed Karkaroff, his warmly paternal ear vanishing in an instant. I notice you have dribbled food all down in front of your robes again, disgusting boy. Karkaroff turned and led his student toward the doors, reaching them at exactly the same moment as Harry, Ron and Hermione. Harry stopped to let him walk through first. Thank you, said Karkaroff carelessly, glancing at him, and then Karkaroff froze. He turned his head back to Harry and stared at him as though he couldn't believe in his eyes. Behind their headmaster, the students from Durmstrang came to a halt too. Durmstrang came to a halt too. Karkaroff's eye moved slowly up Harry's face and fixed upon his scar. The Durmstrang students were staring curiously at Harry too. Out of the corner of his eyes, Harry saw comprehension down on a few of their faces. The boy with food all down his front nudged and girl next to him and pointed openly at Harry's forehead. Yeah, that's Harry Potter, said growling voice from behind them. Professor Karkaroff spun around. Mad-Eye Moody was standing there, leaning heavily on his staff, his magical eye glaring unblinkingly at the Durmstrang headmaster. The color drained from Karkaroff's face as Harry watched. A terrified look of mingled fury and fear come over him. You, he said, staring at Moody as though unsure he was really seeing him. Me, said Moody grimly. And unless you have got anything to say to Porter Parcroft, you might want to move. You are blocking the doorway. It was true. Half the students in the hall were now waiting behind them, looking over one another's shoulder to see what was causing the hope up. Without another word, Professor Parcroft swept his student away with him. Moody watched him until he was out of sight, his magical eye fixed upon his back, a look of intense dislike upon his mutilated face. As the next day was Saturday, most students would normally have breakfast late. Harry, Ron, and Hermione, however, were not alone in rising much earlier than they usually did on weekends. When they went down into the entrance hall, they saw about 20 people milling around it, some of them eating toast, all examining the goblet of fire. It had been placed in the center of the hall on the stool that normally bore the sorting hat. A thin golden line had been traced on the floor, forming a circle 10 feet around it in every direction. Anyone put their name in yet? Rona asked a third-year girl eagerly. All the drumstand lot, she replied. But I haven't seen anyone from Hogwarts yet. Bet some of them put it in last night after we had all gone to bed, said Harry. I would have if it had been me. Wouldn't have wanted everyone watching. What if the goblet just gobbled you right back out again? Someone laughed behind Harry. Turning, he saw Fred George and Lee Jordan hurrying down the staircase, all three of them looking extremely excited. Done it, Fred said in triumphant whisper to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Just taken it. What? Said Ron. The aging potion. Young Ben, said Fred. One drop, said George, rubbing his hand together with glee. We only need to be very few months older. We are going to split the 1,000 gallons between the three of us if one of us wins, said Lee, grinning broadly. I'm not sure this is going to work, said Hermione warningly. I'm sure Dumbledore will have thought of it. Fred, George, and Lee ignored her. Ready? Fred said to the other two, quivering with excitement. Come on then, I'll go first. Harry was fascinated as Fred pulled a slip of parchment out of his pocket bearing the word Fred Weasley, Hogwarts. Fred walked right up to the edge of the line and stood there, rocking on his toes like a driver preparing for a 50-foot drop. When the eyes of every person in the entrance hall upon him, he took a great breath and stepped over the line. For a split second, Harry thought it had worked. George certainly thought so, for he let out the yell of triumph and leapt after Fred. But next moment there was a loud sizzling sound, and both teams were hurled out of the goblin circle as though they had been thrown by an invisible shot putter. They landed painfully 10 feet away on the cold stone floor, and to add insult to injury, there was a loud popping noise, and both of them sprouted identical long white breads. The entrance hall rang with laughter. Even Fred and George joined in once they had got to their feet and taken a good look at each other's beard. I did warn you, said a deep, amused voice, and everyone turned to see Professor Dumbledore coming out of the great hall. He served Fred and George, his eyes twinkling. I suggest you both go up to Madame Pomfrey. She is already tending to Miss Fax of Ravenclaw and Mr. Summer of Hufflepuff, both of whom decided to age themselves up a little too. Though I must say neither of their beard is anything like as fine as yours. Fred and George set off for their hospital wing, accompanied by George, who was howling with laughter, and Harry and Ron and Hermione. Also, Courtling went into the breakfast. The decoration in the Great Hall had changed this morning as it was Halloween. Clouds of live bats were fluttering around enchanted ceiling. like hundred of hard pumpkin laid from Harry every corner. Harry led the way over to Dean and Seamus, who were discussing those Hogwarts students of 17th or who might be entering. There is a rumor going around what Warrington got up early and put his name in. Dean told Harry that big bloke from Slytherin who looked like a sloth. Harry, who had played Quidditch against Warrington, shook his head in disgust. We can't have a Slytherin champion. And all the Hufflepuff are talking about degree. And Seamus contemptuously. But I wouldn't have thought he had have wanted to risk his golden looks. Listen, said Hermione suddenly. People were cheering out in the entrance hall. They all whizzed around in their seat and saw Angelina Johnson coming into the hall, grinning in an embarrassed sort way. A tall black girl who played chaser on the Gryffindor Quidditch team. Angelina came over to them, sat down, and said, "Well, I have done it. Just put my name in it." "You are kidding," said Ron, looking impressed. "Are you 17 then?" asked Harry. "Of course she is. Can't see a beard." "And you?" said Ron. "I had my birthday last week," said Angelina. "Well, I'm glad someone from Gryffindor's entering," said Hermione. "I really hope you get it, Angelina." "Thanks, Hermione," said Angelina, smiling at her. "Yeah, better you than pretty boy degree," said Seamus, causing several Hufflepuff passing their table to scroll heavy at him. "Whatever we are going to do today?" Ron asked Harry and Hermione when they had finished breakfast and were leaving the Great Hall. "We haven't been down to visit Hagrid yet, and Harry, said Ron, "just as long as he doesn't ask us to donate a few fingers to Scrooge." A look of great excitement suddenly dawned on Harry's Hermione's face. "I have just realized I haven't asked Hagrid to join SPEW yet," she said brightly. "Wait for me, will you, while I nip upstairs and get the badges?" "What is it with her?" said Ron, excited, as Hermione ran down up the marble staircase. "Ron," said Harry, suddenly, "it's your friend." The students from Boxbottom were coming through the front door from the ground. Among them, the villa girl. Those gathered around the goblet of fire stood back and let them pass. Watching eagerly, Madame Maxim entered the hall behind the students and organized them into a line. One by one, the Boxbottom students stepped across the age line and dropped their slip of parchment into the blue-white flames. As each name entered the fire, it turned briefly red and emitted sparks. "What do you reckon will happen to the one who aren't chosen?" Ron muttered to Harry as the villa girl dropped her parchment into the goblet of fire. "Reckon they'll go back to school or hang around to watch the tournament?" "Don't know," said Ron. "Hang around, I suppose. Madam Maxim saying to judge, isn't she? When all the box bottom students have submitted the name, Madam Maxim led them back out of the hall and out onto the grounds again. "Where are they sleeping then?" said Ron, moving toward the front door and staring after them. A loud rattling noise behind them announced Hermione's appearance with the box of SPW baggage. "Oh God, hurry up," said Ron, and he jumped down the stone steps, keeping his eyes on the back of the villa girl, who was now halfway across the lawn with Madame Maxim. As they neared Hagrid cabin on the edge of the forbidden forest, the mystery of the Backsbottom sleeping quarter had solved. The giant powder blue carriage in which they had arrived had been parked 200 yards from the Hagrid's front door, and the students were climbing back inside it. The elephantine flying horse that had pulled the carriage were now grazing in a makeshift paddock alongside. Harry knocked on Hagrid's door and Frank's blooming box answered instantly. "About time," said Hagrid when he had flung open the door. "Thought you forgot where I live." We are being really busy, Hagrid. Hermione started to say, but she stopped dead, looking up at Hagrid, apparently lost for word. Hagrid was wearing his best and very horrible hairy brown suit plus a check yellow and orange tie. This wasn't the worst of it, though he had evidently tried to tame his hair using large quantity of what appeared to be axle grease. It was now slicked down into two-hole bunch. Perhaps he had tried a ponytail like Bill's, but found he had too much hair. The look didn't really suit Hagrid at all. For a moment Hermione googled at him, then obviously decided not to comment. She said, where are you, Screeds? Out by the pumpkin patch, said Hagrid happily. They are getting massive, must be nearly 3 foot long now. Only trouble is they are started killing each other. Oh no, said Hermione, shooting a repressive look at Harry, who was staring at Hagrid's odd hairstyle, and just opened his mouth to say something about it. Yeah, said Hagrid sadly. It's okay about. I have got an M in separate boxes now. Still got about 20. Well, that's lucky, said Ron. Hagrid missed the sarcasm. Hagrid's cabin comprised a single room, in one corner of which was a giant bed covered in a patchwork, with a similar enormous wooden table and chair stood in front of the fire beneath. The quantity of cursed ham and dead bird hanging from the ceilings. They sat down at the table while Hagrid started to make tea, and were soon immersed in yet more discuss of Triwizardry tournament. Hagrid seemed quite as excited about it as they were. You wait, he said, grinning. You just wait. You are going to see some stuff you have never seen before. First task, but I'm not supposed to say. Go on, Hagrid. Harry, Ron, and Hermione urged him, but he just shook his head, grinning. I don't want to spoil it for you, said Hagrid, but it's gonna be spectacular. I'll tell you that them champions are going to have their work cut out. Never thought I had liked to see the Triwizard tournament played again. They ended up having lunch with Hagrid, though they didn't eat much. Hagrid had made what he said was a beef casserole, but after Hermione unearthed and large tale in her, she, Harry, and Ron rather lost their appetite. However, they enjoyed themselves trying to make Hagrid tell them what the task is the tournament we are going to be. Speculating which of the entrants were likely to be selected as a champion and wondering whether Fred and George were less yet. A light rain had started to fall by mid-afternoon. It was very cozy sitting by the fire, listening to the gentle patter of the drop on the window, watching Hagrid darning his socks and arguing with Hermione about house elf, for the flatter refused to join SPEW when she showed him her baggage. It's bedouin tightness, Hermione, he said gravely, treating a massive bone needle with a thick yellow yarn. It's in their nature to look after humans. That's what they like. See, you had been making an happy to make take their wave up in insulting. You tried to pay them. But Harry said Dobby free and he was over to the moon about it, said Hermione, and we heard he's asking for wages now. Yeah, well, you get weirdos in every breed. I'm not saying there isn't a old elf who had take freedom, but you'll have pursued most of them to do it. No, nothing doing, Hermione. Hermione looked very cross indeed and stuffed her box of baggage back into her cloak pocket. Past 5 it was growing dark, and Ron, Harry, and Hermione decided it was time to get back up and the castle for the Halloween feast, and more important, the announcement of school champions. I'll come with you, said Hagrid, putting away his darning. Just give a sec. Hagrid got up, went across to the chest of drawer beside his bed, and began searching for something inside it. They didn't pay too much attention until it turned horrible smell reached their nostrils. Coughing, Ron said, Hagrid, what's that? Said Hagrid, turning around with a large bottle in hand. Don't you like it? Is that aftershave? Said Hermione in a slight chopped voice. Hagrid muttered. He was blushing. Maybe it's a bit much, he said gruffly. I'll take it off. Hang on. He sprang out of a cabin and they saw him washing himself vigorously in the water barrel outside the window. Said Hermione, amazing Hagrid. And what's with the hair and the suit? Said Harry in undertone. Look, said Ron suddenly pointing out of the window. Hagrid had just straightened up and turned round. If he had been blushing before, it was nothing to what he was doing now, getting to their feet very cautiously, so that Hagrid wouldn't spot them. Harry, Ron and Hermione peered through the window and saw that Madame Maxim and the Baxbottle student had just emerged from their carriage, clearly about to set off for the feast too. They couldn't hear what Hagrid was saying, but he was talking to Madame Maxim with a rapt, misty-eyed expression Harry had only ever seen him wear once before, when he had been looking at the baby dragon Norbert. He was going to be the castle with her, said Hermione indignantly. I thought he was waiting for us. Without so much as the backward glance at his cabin, Hagrid was turning off up to the ground with Madame Maxim. The box-bottom pseudo following in their wake, jogging to keep up with their enormous strides. He facing her, said Ron incredulously. Well, if they end up having children, they'll be setting a world record. Bet any baby of their would high weight about a ton. They let themselves out of the cabin and shut the door behind them. It was surprisingly dark outside. Drawing their cloak more closely around themselves, they set off up the sloping lawn. Oh, it's them. Look, Hermione whispered. The Drumstrang party was walking up toward the castle from the lake. Victor Crumb was walking side by side with Karkaroff, and the other Drumstrang students were struggling along behind them. Ron watched Crumb excitedly, but Crumb did not look around as he reached the front door, a little ahead of Hermione, Ron and Harry, and proceeded through them. When they entered the candlelight great hall, it was almost full. The goblet of fire had been moved. It was now standing in front of the Dumbledore's empty chair at the teacher's table. Fred and George, Dean Shave again, seemed to have taken their disappointment very well as well. Oh, it's Angelina, said Fred as Harry, Ron and Hermione sat down. So do I, said Hermione breathlessly. Well, we'll soon know. The Halloween feast seemed to take much longer than usual, perhaps because it was their second feast in 2 days. Harry didn't seem to fancy the extravagantly prepared food as much as he would have normally. Like everyone else in the household, judging by the constantly craning neck, the impatient expression on every face, the frighting and the standing up to see whether Dumbledore had finished eating yet. Harry simply wanted the plate to clear and to hear who had been selected as a champion. As long as feast, the golden plate turned to their original spotless state, and there was a sharp upswing in the level of noise within the hall, which died away almost instantly as Dumbledore got to his feet. On either side of him, Professor Karkaroff and Madame Maxim took a tense and expected as anyone. Ludo Bigman was beginning and winking in a various student. Mr. Crouch, however, looked quite uninterested, almost bored. Well, the goblet is almost ready to make its decision, said Dumbledore. I estimated that it required 1 more minute. Now, when the champion names are called, I would ask them please to come up to the top of the hall, walk along the staff table and go through into the next chamber. He indicated the door behind the staff table where they will be receiving their first instruction. He took out his wand and gave a great swing wave with it at once, and all candles except those inside Crave Pumpkin were extinguished. plugging them into a state of smic darkness. The goblet fire now shone more brightly than anything in the whole hall. The sparkling bright blue whiteness of the flame almost painful on the eyes. Everyone watched, wanting. A few people kept checking their watches. Any second, Lee Jordan whispered, 2 seats away from Harry. The flame inside Golden turned suddenly red again. Sparks began to fly from it. Next moment, a tongue of flame shot into the air. A charred piece of parchment fluttered out of it. The whole room gasped. Dumbledore caught a piece of parchment and held it in arm's length so that he could read it by the light of the flame, which had turned black to blue white. The champion for top strength drank wisely. Victor Champion. What surprise here, said Ron as a storm of applause and cheering swept the hall. Harry saw Victor rise from the slithering table and slot off toward Dumbledore. He turned ready to walk up along the staff table and disappear through the door into the next chamber. Bravo, Victor! Boomed Karkaroff so loudly that everyone could hear him. Even over all the applause knew you had it in you. The clapping and chattering died down. Now everyone's attention was focused again on the goblet, which a second later turned red once more. A second piece of parchment shot out of it, propelled by the flame. The champion of the Backsbottom and Dumbledore is Fleur Delacour. It's her, Ron! Harry shouted as the girl who so resembled a villa got graceful to her feet, shook back her sheet on silver blonde hair and swept up between the Ravenclaws and Hufflepuff table. Oh look, they are all disappointed, Hermione said over the noise, nodding toward the remainder of the Backsbottom party. Disappointed was a bit of an underestimate, Harry thought. Two of the girls who had not been selected had dissolved into tears and were sobbing with their head on their arms. When Fleur Draco too hard to vanish into the side chamber, silence fell again. But this time it was a silence too stiff with excitement. You would almost taste it, the Hogwarts champion next, and the goblet fire turned red once more. Sparks shot out of it. The tongue of flame shot high into the air, and from its tip Dumbledore pulled a third piece of parchment. The Hogwarts champion, he called, is Cedric Diggory. No, said Ron loudly, but nobody heard him except Harry. The uproar from the next table was too great. Every single Hufflepuff had jumped to his or her feet, screaming and stamping. The Cedric made his way past them, grinning broadly, and headed off toward the chamber behind the teacher table. Indeed, the applause for Cedric went on so long that it was some time before Dumbledore could make himself heard again. Excellent, Dumbledore called happily as he last the tumult died down. Well, we now have our three champions. I'm sure I can count upon all of you, including the remaining students from Waxbottom and Dumblestrange, to give your champions everyone's to support you can master. But cheering your champion on you will contribute. But Dumbledore suddenly spoke, speaking, and it was apparently to everyone what had distracted him. The fire in Goblet had just turned red again. Sparks were flying out of it. A long flame shot suddenly into the air, and borne upon it was another piece of parchment. Automatically, it seemed Dumbledore reached out a long hand and seized the parchment. He held it out and stared at the name written upon it. There was a long pause during which Dumbledore stared at the sleeve of his hand, and everyone in the room stared at Dumbledore, and then Dumbledore cleared his throat and read it out, Harry Potter. That's it for today. Thank you so much. Stay tuned for next chapter. Till then, see ya. Bye bye.